everybody, and welcome to Shame to Shine. I'm Steph. I am so excited to be here today with Marlee Liss. Marlee is an award-winning speaker, survivor advocate, somatic educator, and author, and she has a really incredible story that I am just so excited to share with all of you, and very grateful, Marlee, that you have said yes and taken the chance to come on because this is our first time meeting. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and everyone tuning in right now. Thank you for being here as well.
Yes. Great, great. So this series being Shame to Shine, it has come up in so many interviews that our Shame to Shine process is not linear. It's very circular and involves a lot of self-acceptance. And I know that we're going to get into that here. But starting with the shame that we experience and the stories that we tell ourselves, that is so helpful to start with to help people feel less alone. Because when we're in that deep shame period, we often feel that isolation of this is only me. So, Marlee, I'd love for you to share with us what the what the shame that you're going to be talking about today, what that story was for you, and what the external circumstances were around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, like you said, it's nonlinear. So there's so many times in life where I've definitely felt shame or even a combination of shame and shine. Like sometimes one aspect of ourselves is shiny and the other one's feeling shame, right? So it can be, yeah, a mixed bag, but definitely the experience I want to talk about today is the shame that I felt, and I know that so many survivors feel after sexual trauma. And even if it wasn't sexual trauma, right? Even if you went through relationship abuse, like there's so many different experiences that lead us to self-blame. And I think self-blame is such a big doorway to shame. And so for me, after trauma, on a cognitive level, we know it's never the survivor's fault what we go through, but often like our body or what that voice of shame is telling us is something different. So for me, even though I knew logically this isn't my fault, it's never the victim's fault, I still really struggled with shame after trauma. And that came in the form of self blame, feeling like I did bring that on by being too naive or too trusting, or not fighting back, like experiencing freeze response, which is so common for survivors as well. And then also just feeling really mad at and disconnected from my body. Like that was such a huge piece where I really felt like I was this separate entity from my body and I felt mad at it. So, yeah, that was like a season of big shame. And a huge part of my story is like this sort of reclamation of justice that happened. But before that reclamation and that shine piece came, it first was going through this system, the criminal legal system, where I felt like the shame was being piled on top of the harm that was already there. And, being up on that stand and having my character questioned, having to prove that I'm credible, having to like prove that my memory is valid, having sexual history brought up and, this idea that whatever we said yes to in the past implies that we've said yes to something in the present, which is just not how consent works. All of those experiences, it was like the shame was just being layered and layered and layered.
Wow, that is really powerful. And you have brought up such an important concept of this internal shame that you're cognitively constantly fighting against, but then it's getting almost exaggerated externally by like, well, are you really sure that this isn't your fault? So how did you navigate that and come to a place of reconciling I'm not going to hold blame or shame for myself around this experience?
Yeah, well, I'll just say first that I think what I just named, it's such a common experience, whether it's coming from the courtroom
Mhm.
or from the best friend that you told that didn't believe you, or, your peers at school who started blaming you or slut shaming you or whatever it was. Like, I think all of us have that experience where we come to someone vulnerably and we're like, I went through this, whatever it was.
Mhm.
And when they don't respond with that care and validation, like that can be so painful,
Mhm.
and it often becomes our norm. So for me, it took me a long time. Like I kept going through that court process for about 3 years.
Wow.
And I kept getting just knocked back in my healing. It was like if I'd taken 20 steps in my healing, every time I engaged with that system, I was sent right back to square one.
Mm.
And I eventually just decided, like, I don't want to cross my own boundaries anymore, and I don't believe that this is helping. Like it's actually harming me more than it's helping me. And so there was this realization, and a lot of healing work led up to that moment of just being like, I don't want to endure something so painful anymore. I don't want to keep having to like sort of violate myself in a way by digging into parts of my memories and my voice that didn't want to be, you know, touched. So, yeah, it took a lot to get to that point of like, no more, set
Mhm.
that boundary. I'm not doing this anymore. But then there was also this grief around, okay, so what am I doing?
Mhm.
And I didn't want to do nothing at all. And I think a good parallel for this is like healing modalities. Maybe someone tries like CBT therapy and they're like, this is actually just re traumatizing me.
Sure.
And then there's this moment of like, should I just stop and do nothing? But then there's this feeling there of like, no, but I do need help.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I came to was like, I don't want to do court. I can't handle doing nothing. Like that feels bad in my body. And so what do I do? And that's where I kind of had to turn inward. And I'm very lucky. I had a friend who helped with that in a huge way by asking me this question, which was, what would meaningful justice look like to you?
Mm.
And you could frame that question as what would be genuinely healing for you?
Yeah.
And it allowed me to block out all the external noise that was saying, do this is the right path, this is the right path. It allowed me to say, like, pause, turn inward towards my own body and
Mhm.
ask myself, like, what do you need?
Mhm.
And when I did that, it was like this really profound shift. And again, I think we all experience that. Like, there's always voices all around us, media, advertisements, friends, peers, parents, who are saying, this is what you should choose. And there's this really profound thing that happens when we're like, okay, I hear you. And what do I actually need? What
Mm.
do I actually want? And so I consulted with my body for the first time on that. And it was this very clear thing of like, I want a process that actually focuses on healing. I
Mm.
want a process where I can ask the questions I've had for years, where I can be real about how much this impacted me. Because in the courtroom, there's sort of censorship and this idea of like how a credible victim appears, and you're expected to show up that way. And so I was like, no, I want to be unfiltered and raw and real about how this impacted me. And I'd want him to do really deep work to actually change so that he doesn't do this to another person. And my friend validated me. She said, like, well, then you should try and make that happen.
Mhm.
And I think we can all support someone's like shame to shine journey by being that voice, right? Even if our friend tells us that their path of healing, like maybe to us, we're like, that's a ridiculous form of therapy or whatever, that will never work. But if our friend's telling us, this is what I need, if we can be that person that's like, yeah, that's valid, you should act on that, then that can be such a huge like permission giver. And
Mhm.
that's what that friend was for me in that moment. She wasn't like, well, that will never happen. She
Right.
was like, yeah, that matters. You should fight for it. And so that became the catalyst where I started doing research, and I eventually saw that there's this practice called restorative justice, which is not new. It's very ancient. Pre colonial societies, indigenous societies have done it for a long time. And it basically was everything that I named. It's a process that does prioritize healing over punishment. and it really takes the shape of whatever the survivor needs. So for me, that was I want my assailant in therapy, and then I want us to eventually meet in this dialogue, in this circle process. And the moment I listened to that and started acting in alignment with what I actually needed, no matter how delusional other voices might think that I was, right? The moment I did that, it was like I was finally in solidarity with my own needs.
Mhm.
I was finally like walking hand in hand with what I actually needed to heal. And in that way, like every step of that process became really healing.
Oof. There is something really profound about that because in the external sense, where we are kind of told we need to outsource, especially in a victim situation, that we need to outsource and we need help. We need
Mm-hmm.
someone else to fix it. That there's a huge gap between when you feel like you can be okay, and then there's even a question mark of if there is the justice that the system says is enough, does it bridge the gap where then internally you feel validated? But instead, you're saying that like that was not happening. You weren't
Mm-hmm.
getting the external validation and it wasn't bridging the gap. And that when you went internal, something shifted right away. It didn't even take the end point to get to a more aligned internal place.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
Yeah.
is that um, consistent with what you have found as you continue on this circular healing journey and then even are in touch with other people? Is there something healing about that initial decision to?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I'm really passionate about like a somatic lens. So basically just listening to our bodies, right?
Yeah.
And recognizing that our bodies have so much wisdom and guidance and information. And part of the wound of sexual trauma is that our body's like compass of what I want and what I don't want was trampled over. It was disrespected. Um, it was like bulldozed essentially. And there's so much pain in that of like my body was telling me no, but that's not what I experienced. And I started realizing as I was doing deep healing work, all the ways that I'd trampled over my own body's compass before.
Yeah.
Like, and I think I'm not even playing into like blaming ourselves for those. And I'm not talking about sexual violence with that. I'm talking about like crossing our own boundaries and saying yes to something when we really want to say no, and fawning and people pleasing and appeasing.
Mm.
Right. So I started to see that like, it's like I had that big wound. And then each time I ignored my own boundaries and said yes to something I didn't want to do, it's like I was like rubbing that wound open and open. Right. And we all do that in big or
Absolutely.
little ways in our lives. And as I was doing this really, really deep healing, because like I wasn't okay after sexual trauma, like I shared, and it became like, um, it became like this sounds so dramatic, but do or die to be like, will I focus on my healing and respect my own boundaries or not?
Mhm.
And I just started getting really serious or responsible about being like, I don't want to further traumatize myself. Like the little being in me, the little inner child in me, I don't want to contribute to her like feeling violated or having her boundaries bulldozed. And so when I started moving with that care, it became really important to be like, if my body's screaming no, I have to voice that, and then whether or not others respect it, that stops being in my lane of control, right? Um, but that's where I do have choice to say, will I voice it? Will I communicate it? Will I listen to it? And so that's what happened in the court process. 3 years in, my body was like, no, 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 I don't want to do this anymore. And I had to respect that. I had to, right? And so then there's this deeper process of, okay, then what are you saying yes to?
Mm.
And there's some creativity in that, which I think is really beautiful because often we're kind of shown two choices. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, do you want to go left or right?
Mhm.
And sometimes we're like, well, left looks scary, right feels void of any emotion. What if there's another direction I can walk in?
Yeah.
And what if I get to decide what that direction looks like? Like, when is there a third path that we maybe haven't been told about? And so that's where I started to see that, like, there's such a creative element of boundaries and desire because when you start to know what your no is, then you can get creative about what you're a yes to. So
Mm.
I have definitely like stayed true to that sort of compass of healing since then. And life is nonlinear, obviously, but I really freaking love my life now.
Yeah.
And I really love like being me and existing in the world, like in this body, with this voice, with these decisions, you know? And so, yeah, I think it's been a profound game changer.
That's gorgeous. So once you made that decision and your friend validated you, you did your research and found this is the process I'm looking for. Was how much serendipity was involved? Did it flow? And like, what ended up happening?
hmm It was definitely as most like self, because I guess what I'm talking about in different terms is like self advocacy,
Yeah.
right? Like we know something's right for us. We're speaking up even when systems or other people who are saying, I'm the authority, I'm the expert, I'm your parent, I'm your doctor, whatever it is, having the courage to be like, no, this is what feels right for me. This is what I need. So, like any journey like that, it was a sticky process of like making it happen. And there was definitely many moments where I had to be like, where I had to stand up for myself
Mhm.
and reassert what I needed. So, in terms of serendipity, absolutely. It was like there were a few key human beings that I'm still close with and I feel grateful for every day that if they had not been like woven into this in one way or another, it wouldn't have played out. And one person was a prosecutor who was assigned to my case. And if she hadn't been in the room the day that I came in and said, I don't want to go to criminal trial, I want a restorative process. If she wasn't there, it wouldn't have happened
Mm.
because the other prosecutor in the room was very quick to be like, oh, honey, like, don't you understand how anything works in this world? Like, just very condescending and invalidating. And this idea of if you don't follow what the expert says is right, then you're dumb. Like, that was kind of her tone, right?
Mhm.
And luckily, this other prosecutor, her name's Kara, she got it. She
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I've been doing sexual assault cases for over 20 years, and victims keep being re-traumatized, rapists keep being acquitted, sexual assault rates are not going down. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, we need to try something different.
Mhm.
And she had the courage to listen to the survivor in the room, to listen, to value lived experience to that degree where she's like, we should listen to this person, right? Which shouldn't be a radical idea, but it often is. Like we're so quick in our big systems,
Yeah.
we see so much like invalidating lived experience.
Mhm.
And it takes a lot for a person to be like, no, you're the one living through this, we should listen to what you actually need. um, so she really fought for it and basically, made it happen. And yeah, I'll never forget getting that phone call where I was told, Kara fought for this. She made it happen. And again, it was this really beautiful healing moment of like also breaking a cycle in a way because I was like, okay, this time I said my no and I said what I do want and someone listened.
Yeah.
And that's the opposite
Mhm.
of what sexual violence is, right? So there was this really powerful sort of like rewriting of my story in that moment of like, oh no, my voice does matter. my needs do matter, my boundaries do matter. And that's shown in this person's actions. So that was, yeah, really powerful.
That is so gorgeous. And it, from the outside, I want to share what the story feels, what the arc feels like, and tell me if this is, how close to the mark this is,
Cool.
where there is a, if it's a visual, like you really have this, you have an experience of trauma and then are seeking help. It's not validating you. And then there's this moment of choosing yourself, choosing to validate yourself, to nurture yourself, to be on your side, to listen to yourself. And then this prompts some, almost like the Truman Show, like any change, there is that initial resistance. And you speak up enough times to overcome that resistance, and now you're like so rooted in who you are, and you have found safety in being your authentic self and expressing yourself, that it's like this blossoming and this rippling effect of getting to share your story in small groups and on large stages with like deep, intimate audiences, with big audiences, and in podcasts and in books. And it's like this sunshine effect of having a beautiful ripple outward. So how much does that visual resonate, or is there anything that you would kind of correct about that storyline?
No, I mean that's thank you. Like it sounds so beautiful. And yeah, I think I guess a piece I'll add, it's not different from what you just
Yeah.
said, just a piece I'll add is that I've found a lot of healing through meaning making.
Mm.
And I think that's really common for anyone, anything we go through. We, become sober, we come out as queer, we leave a toxic relationship, we leave a toxic workplace, whatever it is. A lot of us feel the sense of like, why did that thing happen?
Mhm.
And there's something really beautiful that we can kind of play with if we're like, maybe it happened so I can like help others,
Yeah.
essentially.
Hmm.
And I really found that's been a really big life raft for me. And that came in the form of writing, that's come in the form of advocacy, that's come in the form of doing podcasts and interviews like this, of sharing my story. And I feel this kind of like responsibility now, almost like torch carrying, to just make sure that people hear these messages, make sure that people know there are third pathways. There's court, there's nothing, there's restorative justice. There's with anything we can come up with like three pathways or more. And I do feel like this really deep responsibility to like use storytelling and kind of like capture the magical and painful and whatever moments of my own healing, to like offer that to someone else, and then they get to do with it what they will, right? Because for some of them they'll be like, no, I like that first path, or like, no, I like that second path, and it's great. But we deserve to have the information, and we deserve to choose. That's really what it comes back to, is like we all have a right to choice in every single moment. And yeah, so that's been a beautiful part of this as well. And I will say, like, I don't think I'd be doing this work still if I didn't get to, well, maybe I would, I don't know. But if I didn't get to see and experience and hear some of the ripples of impact, because when someone reaches out to me and they say, like, wow, I didn't know that third path existed, and this is a message I got once, I feel like I've been waiting to hear this story since I was 13.
Wow.
And yeah, it's moments like that where I'm like, whew, like, it's this story's not even really about me anymore. It's just like almost, it's not mythology because it's real, but like you know how we kind of pass down myths and we're like, what lessons and learnings and feelings can we take from this? That's kind of how I feel about this story now. Like I'm just like kind of in service of it and I'm like offering it out in this really embodied way and then kind of marveling at like what the responses and ripples are.
Mm. Well, thank you for doing that. I feel it really deeply and feel so inspired by your choice to listen to yourself and how that I think that is a extremely relatable challenge of that we all go through of either responding to what we should be doing externally, whether how we should be healing, how we should be dealing with trauma, how we should be living our life, especially women, and and especially empaths, and then your choice to listen to yourself and advocate for yourself is like this rooted plant in the ground, and it really has blossomed into something so beautiful. And I'm so happy to hear you say that you love being you and you love your life and do love serving others in this way. So I thank you, thank you, thank you for doing what you're doing and for sharing your story here on Shame to Shine. I'm sure a lot of listeners will be very inspired. So we will have all of your links for people that want to find you. And I also want to open it up. Is there anything that you want to share with audience members about what it's like to engage in your community or any invitations that you have?
Yeah, yes. So, and I've loved talking with you, by the way. I always feel like, yeah, I just feel very cup full and set like sunlight pouring through the window vibes talking to
Me
you.
too.
Yeah. So a few things. One, you can follow me online. I share every single day on Instagram, on TikTok, conversations like this around justice, healing, boundaries, all of these things. And then I also launched a coalition called Survivors for Justice Reform. And if anyone feels like compelled to heal through meaning making, connect with other survivors, advocate for that sort of like there's no one size fits all to justice message. You can check that out as well. We are over 700 survivors now from around the world who are all advocating for a form of justice that's truly synonymous with healing. So people can check out Survivors for Justice Reform. And I'll also mention that my book is going to be coming out in 2027. And it's my story of restorative justice after sexual trauma, but so much more than that as well. So I'm really excited to share that. So just keep an eye out.
That's awesome. I will definitely want to check that out. So we can all follow you to be on the lookout for when that comes. And wow, just incredible story. Thank you for shining your light and sharing with all of us, Marlee.
Thank you so much.